So 96, and I was there for a year and a half or so, and then with Bank of America for a couple of years. Then then in 99 I started with another. Well, I joined a cat coaching class, like Pau Chow did that, and so did Hitesh. No, sorry, Ritesh Imrajani did that. Pau Chow did that, and some others also. They started in Delhi. We were in Bombay, and we did that for a while. Funnily enough, that so it wasn't something which I started off. I joined another entrepreneur. It was called Kids, and it was a locally Bombay group. So what happened was, if you remember IMS, I think many of us would have either used it directly or test papers or something of that sort. But IMS, yeah, Mr. Rane actually died, I think, on the day of the cat in 1994, the year after. Mr. Rane was the founder of it.
Oh, really?
Okay.
So very fascinating that part. So anyway, so I'm digressing. It's not important for, but just the part. So IMS didn't have any. He didn't have any heirs. So his nephew who was a flight purser, Kamlesh Sajnani, he kind of started running it, and so there was not much focus. All of these small coaching classes kind of spawned all over the country at that time in the late 90s. So Delhi had CL, which is what Satya, as in Srini's brother, and they started off. Satya joined later. Then there was others in Calcutta. So we have Naveen Saraf in Calcutta who's doing that now. Pawan and Ritesh Hemrajani in Delhi, and I briefly did that in Bombay back then with this Ajit Khurana. In a couple of years from then, we actually sold to CL, which is Srini. Satya is the younger brother, but older than us in the IM sense. He joined IM before Srini. So we sold off in 2001, and then I was again into banking software and stuff like that. I worked for a switch company, which essentially does ATM. Again, a kind of, not a startup, but a mid-sized company which is really growing very rapidly. This is early 2000s. So for instance, all the retail Indian private sector retail banks were going big time on launching ATM. So all of those things were quite exciting at that time. So after all that, 2006, I joined an investment bank called Globus Capital Advisors. So we were doing mid-market. It was a boutique investment bank. Some ex-Merrill, ex-Kleinwort Benson people got together, and we were trying to advise on lots of it in the telecom sector, incidentally. Some of the large mergers that subsequently happened, I was not involved in some of them as when they happened, but kind of, was part of that industry for some time. Anshuman also, Anshuman lad, for those who were in E-Block, he was our junior, 97 batch. And he joined Prime Broking in 97. Because he was in E-Block, I kind of knew him much better than most of you all probably know him. Sam would probably know him well. But so Anshuman and we bumped into each other, Prime Broking. He was in Prime Broking in 97. I was friendly with him in college also. So we kept in touch, but not really, we weren't all that close back then. We were in touch, but not. So he also, after Prime Broking, he started this maritime consulting company called iMaritime. So he's been entrepreneurial all his life. Then in the early 2000s, he quit all this, and for a year, he went to this, there's something called Ekal Vidyalaya, which essentially tribal schools in the remote parts of the country. So he just went around trying to teach in those schools, just pro bono, because it wasn't like a commercial or a professional thing, but he just did that for a year. So he had some background, and then he also came back, and he also joined the same Globus Capital Advisors. So two of us were there from 2005 to 2008. That was the time when we kind of were working together. So this was, obviously before the financial sector crisis of 2008, right? Before Lehman happened. But lots of deals were happening then. And, so I remember doing some of those Excels, for instance. There was this company called Prozone, which was a subsidiary of Provogue. Provogue was a fashion brand in India. It was kind of, if you were in India in 2005-06, you would have known of it. Chaturvedis. They got into some drug-related issues later and all. But I remember I still probably have that pitch deck somewhere and the Excel sheet somewhere, which spoke about. So we sold it to a brand. I mean, we essentially got investments from Liberty of London. There's a London-based retailer called Liberty. And I still remember that Excel. We were talking about first year there'll be 5 malls, and next year there'll be 30, and then 150. The usual nonsense, right? So I think it's been 13 years, and they have 1 or 2 malls as of now. I didn't do anything of that. We of course managed to sell and get our fees, whatever, little bit of salary bonus, whatever. So anyway, so point being that we were doing all of that. There some deals with this Pantaloon guy. he was still in the news at this point of time. But there was a airport retailer.
Can you just come closer to your mic? It's break. Yeah. Unless it's for me, I'm not sure. But
no, I'll come. That's fine. So Pantaloon
interestingly, Jeetu is still in that fashion industry. Aditya Birla Group.
No, I know he's with because Madura Coats and all, right? I think it went from there. Coats Viela, Madura Coats, and Indian Rayon Bottom Coats. Anyway, so the point being that we were doing all of that. So Anshuman and I, after 3-4 years, and a lot of our batchmates and friends are also doing well financially. We thought that let's do something which has some. We were entrepreneurial because even earlier, like I said, I had started off cat coaching, then again gone back to industry. He also had done that. So we were like looking at, okay, let's try and do something which is kind of, it's a business, but let's try and do something which makes some impact in the country, right? Do some socially relevant. This was pretty much the only thing that we actually knew at that point of time. So because of his background in having, like I mentioned earlier, he had spent some time in tribal villages. So he knew that electricity access was a very big problem, most of those places. And doing anything would be, any impact would be difficult without electricity, right? So without good energy access. So that's how we kind of, and it was also the time when, if you remember, around 2008, there was a Goldman Sachs report on peak oil and whatever, $250 a barrel, stuff like that. And so if you ask any person in the banking community then and ask them for a prediction on oil prices, say in 2007, nobody would say that, 8 years later, it will be back at $30. So you could easily tell people that, fossil fuel prices are going to go through the roof. I actually thought that it's difficult to predict. I mean, honestly, in many meetings, I said, I don't know. How do you know? Demand can crash, supply can increase. Why do you want to predict just because it's on the upswing right now? But anyway, it suited us to, the environment kind of suited us, and because people were kind of concerned about oil prices, and in general, LPG subsidies come into the play. All of those, things kind of, which sort of the second phase again we are facing right now, right? So anyway, so we went and told some, kind of friends, family, like Anshuman's family, some batchmates actually, including Satish, who's one of our investors, Satish's company, and Manish, Ajay Matrani, all of these, we just kind of had a one-pager at that time, which essentially said that, look, we don't know much about this industry, but we think that fossil fuel prices are going to be, fossil fuels are going to get more and more expensive and unviable. Renewables, you can clearly see that the pricing is beginning, the technology is kind of maturing or evolving in a way that the pricing will start coming down. So at some point of time, that will start making more sense versus fossil fuels. And rural India does have a tremendous electricity problem, right? So these being the broad problem statements, we'll try and address this through a company. That's all that we know right now. So if you think we are honest guys who are trying to do this, you can come in and we did an at par issue, right? In the sense, we brought in whatever, suppose we brought in 10 lakhs and Satish got 10 lakhs, both of us would have a 50-50 share. So because at that point of time, getting into a valuation game, it didn't make much sense. So I think that kind of helped us to raise some money. In the initial part, because we were the first 2008 to 10, our thought was that we will use our kind of background in the financial sector and see if there are good investable companies in trying to address the rural energy problem. Maybe kind of mentor them, and because they may not have scale or the ability to raise finance or to access technology, all of which we could kind of help bridge, right? So that was the thought process. Just kind of mentor some. So we tried to do somewhat something like a fund structure in the sense, invest in those companies, small amounts, let's say we're talking about 10 lakhs, 15 lakhs, but very early stage also. Say a company based in Kolhapur, which is trying to address the, trying to do something in supplying gas, cooking gas through, you know, like a biogas plant, right? Something like a biogas plant. So they were bottling cylinders. So we would try and see if we could invest in that company, mentor, handhold, and make them grow. And at some point of time, we could kind of wear our investment banking hat to kind of access capital or help them access capital. That was the broad thing that we did in the first couple of years. Very soon we realized that there weren't, at least we were not able to identify. I think I'm sure there are some companies that are doing great, but we weren't able to identify companies which had the ability to execute the operations very well in those areas. There were companies, but they also faltered in execution often. And so that whole thing about, we could kind of have a bouquet of maybe 7, 8 companies which are in different verticals in India and help them grow. That kind of, about the first 18 months or so, we realized that that's not happening so easily. So then we kind of had this opportunity. There was this BPO called Rural Shores. That was an interesting thing. Rural Shores, Deepankar might be familiar because I think some of the people he might know. So this is a Bangalore-based company. I think their main hypothesis was that just like, India was the back office of, or doing like grunt work in terms of data entry or BPO for the Western world, and so the whole Bangalore concept. Maybe Lucknow can do to a Bangalore what a Bangalore did to a New York, right? That was the thought process. That rural India, you can have manpower who kind of say do data entry or voice. So rural shores. So that would help with the economy in the rural areas, but and also there would be a clear arbitrage. So for instance, Aadhaar was coming up, and there are lots of data entry opportunities at that time, early 2011 or so. So, but obviously the problem that they faced again was reliable electricity in, say, even 50 kilometers from Lucknow. You would face problems of big outages and all that. So they approached us and said, "Can you provide us a solution?" So in that project, we actually did the project ourselves, where we set up what's called a RESCO, Rural Energy Service Company. That's widely known jargon in this sector. So essentially, what you do is you kind of set up the solar plant on the rooftop of their facility in, say, rural Lucknow. This was 70 kilometers from Lucknow, and you kind of guarantee an uptime. And you charge a monthly fee for that uptime. So it's like a services-based model, right? So you provide the electricity. They of course have their team which does the BPO part, right? But the energy part will come in. And so the idea was that since they were also, in a sense, just about starting up, they had 7, 8 centers, and the thought process was that if they get to 100 centers and we kind of go along,
and expect you to be there to take the call.
Yeah. So that was the thought process. So that was implemented, and it did quite okay. I mean, we were able to help them with the energy problem, but they themselves had scaling problem. I mean, beyond electricity, there are other problems in scaling also in rural India, right? So I don't think they scaled as fast as we thought they would. But around the time, one interesting that, so we used to attend all these solar conferences, India off-grid seminar, and this, that, and the other, India Solar, be happening in Goregaon and Bombay. We used to go and meet, attend these seminars, go to the stall. So we bumped into a bunch of people from Bosch, as in the Myco layout Bosch, right? So it's a German company, of course, essentially an automobile company, as in company which gives provides equipment to the automobile sector. But they were looking at expanding into solar. They had set up a plant. This was 2011 or so. They had set up a fairly large plant in Germany, and they thought that India was a great opportunity because of, again, the same problems that we spoke of. So they said that, look, we want to kind of test our solar panels, like, a typical German thought process, right? Make sure that it functions extremely well under all different types of climatic conditions and so on and so forth, right? So they said that let's, we want to try and test our modules, the solar modules. So we want to test it in 3 parts of India, one in the north, one in the central part, and one in South India, and in different types of end user situations, right? So would you be able to identify a village for us where we will fund the entire village for you, but you need to kind of essentially help us run this techno-commercial pilot where it's set up, it provides electricity to the villages, to the village, sorry, and we'll keep monitoring the data and see how our panels are doing and if it's viable for the village and so on. So we jumped at that and said we could definitely do it. And we identified this village called Darewadi, which is about 80 kilometers from Pune, in a tribal hamlet. So this is a hamlet in Pune district, which was a 40 household hamlet. So what happens is what we don't realize in India, so the census talks of about 6 lakh villages in the country. But when you talk about 6 lakh villages, those are what are called revenue. I mean, many of the party of people here would probably not be so familiar. Those are what are called revenue villages. Essentially, you would have, depending on different parts of the country, you would have something called a tehsildar. So it's a revenue collecting unit, and that is called a village. But it is not necessarily a small, tightly knit geographical unit at all. It is not necessarily that. It could vary from state to state. In some states, you could have a parent village, which is at a certain spot. And in a 5 kilometer radius, you could have these small hamlets, which have, say, 60 households, 80 households, right? And those hamlets sometimes kind of spawn organically, in the sense it could just be that 10 years ago, there was no hamlet there, but people found it more convenient to access their farmland from there. So a few families migrated and then. So why am I saying this? Because the parent village could often be electrified. So the country's statistic on electrification assumes that the village is electrified, but several hamlets within them have not seen any electricity at all their lives, right? So we identified one such hamlet, and so we did an end-to-end process where we actually went and met them and created a village electrification community there. We told them that, look, this is something which Bosch is going to sponsor, but unless you create sustainability for the plant yourself, long term, you'll not have success. So in these 3 or 4 years, just to dial back a bit, we had visited lots of places. There were lots of NGOs and government programs which had gone and distributed en masse, solar home lighting systems to some remote village. Many of them are not functional because the villagers themselves didn't know why they were given that home lighting system. Because government tendered and distributed this, right? But within 6 months, if they don't know what to do with the battery, and if the battery gets spoiled, you'll see it. And we saw tens of thousands of defunct such plants, individual plants. I'm talking about 2008, 9, 10, and so on. So that might have itself run into megawatts in terms of number of, if you aggregate all of them. So we were very convinced that unless you get a buy-in and explain to the community what you're trying to do, it's just ridiculous to kind of just go and distribute things free of cost, right? Notionally it solves the problem, but it doesn't actually create a long-term. And especially if you're solving only the lighting problem, people are used to using kerosene. You go back to kerosene in 6 months if there's a problem. So what we realize is that if you create a unit which gives you the ability to do much more than just lighting. Theoretically, you can run a fridge in our village. You can run an AC in our village. You can run a chakki, grinding machine, or you can do anything. So some kind of small farming equipment, pumps, etc. All of that can be run. If you do all of that cannot be easily replicated by, as in, if the plant were to fail, you would not be able to just go back to your kerosene, right? So essentially, you kind of make sure they're hooked into it, right? Because they see the value. Once you go to a village which has been where the women have been spending 4 to 5 hours a day to fetch water, and suddenly you have electricity there, and you can then run a pump which kind of from the same water source pump water to a central location, then those women are then not going to allow you to let the system fail. So the whole point is, if you just go and blindly, do what you feel is the right for them, it doesn't often happen. If you can get a community buy, then they will contribute. So here, therefore, the process is you engage with them initially, you get them together, you explain to them what we're doing, and we focused on locations where grid extension, even financially, was not the best for the country, because every kilometer of grid extension also costs money, right? So why would you want to extend? So at some point, there's a break even where the solar plant makes more. Assuming that you want to give them electricity, if the government is anyway going to subsidize that, or somebody is going to subsidize that, then a solar plant in that location is more financially viable than the grid extension. So Gram Urja would always identify, or the endeavor would be always to identify those villages where this kind of held. Don't go and just give it in, like 5 kilometers from Pune, where tomorrow if the grid were to extend, you can't then compete given battery costs and all that. It's very difficult. So we identify this village, create this community, and create a sense of ownership in them in this whole plant. And on 4th July, that is American Independence Day, right? 4th July 2012, we inaugurated our first plant, and people from Germany and all came in to see that plant, and that was a big success because. So I think. A little after that, there were some cricket matches and all in the area, and the grid, which was just about a kilometer away, was not very predictable, right? It would come off. So during the cricket match season, we gave 24/7 electricity to this hamlet of 40 households. So people from the parent village, like I say, the village which started coming in here to see, because idhar to chalta hai, hamara grid nahi chalta, ye chalta. Because so our point was give them grid-like electricity. That is, in India, the standard is 230 volts, 50 hertz. You can run any appliance. Of course, you are limited by the amount of energy that the solar panels can and the inverter can kind of throw out at that particular location. So, but that is true of any system in India. In a sense, Bombay has a limit of about 3,800 megawatts. Essentially, suppose there's a peak load of 5,000 megawatts, because every household starts the AC at the same time, and the Bombay grid will collapse, which is perhaps the most reliable grid in the country, right? So ultimately, every grid has a limit. So we are just saying that here we give you 10 kilowatt peak systems, which will help you to run your lighting because LED lighting also became quite a standardized thing by then. Otherwise, it was your old incandescent, but then it had already moved to CFM. But LED lighting for the same lumens, for the same amount of lighting output, it consumes just 1/10 the energy, or maybe perhaps even less. So that kind of helped us to kind of take that story forward. So you essentially give a house with 4 or 5 LED lighting points. You give them plug points to run whatever appliance they want, but you have a metered connection, right? That is the important part, I think. A metered connection where they have to pay as they use, as in if they use more than the neighbor, then they need to pay more, because otherwise the system will just kind of start crashing, because everyone. So just as an example, the Chhattisgarh government back then had a very good program of implementing similar kind of grids, right? Distributed microgrids, as it's called. What they did, of course, however, was that they said that no, we can charge only 30 rupees fixed cost per household per month. So the moment you start, and this is a very funny anecdote, 30 rupees fixed cost per month meant that there was so there would always in any village for 50, 60 households, there'll be 4 or 5 people who can afford more, right? So they would get in their TV, for instance, right? So they start drawing much more power than the system can actually eventually supply. Few households would. So then what would happen is that then the number of hours of supply would go down from 12 hours to 4 hours. So you have a battery-based system where you are designing it for 10 hours of supply, but you give a fixed pricing, and the end user, because there's no incentive to save, because whether I use or don't use, I'm paying 30 rupees. The richer people use a lot, and the system starts crashing. So now the fun part is you have battery-based system. Now, because these people who have have televisions or maybe refrigerators, whatever, in their homes, they now say that, my power is going down to 4 hours a day, right? From the 8 hours. So let me put a battery and inverter in my home. So they would kind of store more power. So essentially the same source of power. You have a limited, a 10 kilowatt system can generate about 50 kilowatt or 45, 50 kilowatt hours of electricity.
Muthu, you have to mute. Muthu.
So the fun part was, so these households, slightly wealthier houses, would put up what all are, are like Pune, Thane, all, the inverters as we call it. Right? You kind of store electricity to, so essentially you are again drawing more power and storing it, which further screws up the entire system, right? It goes down from 4 hours to 2 hours. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. So the point is, unless you kind of discipline the user in some fashion, that there is some money that needs to be paid for usage, it's likely to kind of crash. So that is the other learning that we had. So all our systems typically have this village electrification committee, metered tariff. The villagers themselves appoint 4 or 5 members in this committee and one person in charge of billing and collecting tariff from each household. And they collect the tariff and put it in an account, which is controlled by them, because every system will require battery replacements in 4 to 5 years. And if that first leg of battery replacement doesn't happen, the system will just crash. If you use good quality material, rest of solar is not very it's not operationally very intensive. It runs by itself. There's no major problem. But if you don't maintain the batteries don't get replaced on time, the system will crash. So we collect tariff, put it in a central account, and they use the money for some operations and maintenance, mainly for battery replacement. So this Darewadi village, which kind of started in 2012, in 2017, so like I said, they had trouble fetching water for themselves because it was very far off the water source. So they kind of laid a pipeline from their own invested capital. They put in money themselves because this was kind of the 2 reasons why they were somewhat more prosperous than other parts of the country. They had this herb called herida, which is used in Ayurvedic medicine. So they had access to, because tribals are conferred the right to collect herida in some from forests. And
what is that again? What is the name again?
HERDA, herida. It's used by many of the Ayurvedic medicine now. So that is one, and secondly, because of proximity to Pune, there would be a lot of migrant labor when construction booms happen, etc. So they were somewhat more well-to-do, and so they put in their own money to lay these pipelines, water, and the women started saving 3 to 4 hours a day, right? Which otherwise they would spend fetching water. So there was a lot of incentive for them to keep the system alive. So 2017 or 18, when the battery started failing, they paid money themselves to get the battery replaced. So the capex was obviously funded by Bosch in this case. And in all honesty, any solar model in these kind of locations, if the capex substantially is not paid for by grants or donations, it's impossible for it to actually work in a financial sense. But the point here is that even the government grid is in a sense a subsidy, right? In the sense, in many of these locations, there's a huge money that's coming out of the central government budget to kind of extend the grid. So there's no real difference in giving the subsidy to this village in the capital grant sense. But after that, the village is at least functioning like they're getting electricity like a city like ours would get, right? Most times it would be up. So Bosch, of course, then what happened in China started getting big time into manufacturing of panels, and Bosch collapsed. So and Bosch decided to shut down their within a year, they decided to shut down their plant. So to give you a perspective, when we got in 2008, solar panels used to cost 210 rupees or so per watt peak, as it's called. Today, those panels are available at even 20, 25 rupees per watt peak. So on the solar panel side, the prices have crashed by 90%. It's like 10% of what it was, say, 14 years back or 15 years back. Gram Urja's projects, typically the panels are not more than 20-25% of the cost at most. So obviously our total costs have not come down because we lay the grids in the villages. We do house wiring. We have to pay for batteries. We have to pay for the inverters and so on and so forth. But otherwise, panel crosses, because like I said, China came in a big way and panels crashed. Panel prices crashed. It was not viable for Bosch to continue with that line of business. So they shut shop. So they helped us do our first pilot. And because it was, Bosch and this Indo-German Chamber of Commerce is very active in Pune especially. One of the reasons I think in Pimpri-Chinchwad as it grew, there were a lot of automotive companies, etc. And in fact, at one point of time, I remember Lufthansa had only first-class flight going from Pune to Berlin and some Pune flying for something. It's a crazy kind of thing. Why do you have a Pune Frankfurt only first-class flight? Because all these CEOs, I think, might have been thrice a week or so, but whatever. So Indo-German Chamber of Commerce being very, solidly entrenched in Pune, so they organize a lot of these international visits to our location. You would have foreign dignitaries coming to this village, which is about 80 kilometers from, and you have to walk down a hill, 2.5 kilometers one way, walk back up. Difficult place to access. So, but we actually at one point of time counted the nationalities, some 25 different nationalities that visited. Because German also, then they want to do something in Africa. They encourage some African people also to come, people from some African countries also to come and visit them. So in that sense, it was quite a success, that village. And then we took the story to various players, Tata Trusts we approached back then, ICICI, all of them helped. And slowly by about 2000, so despite our first village being successful, for us to go from the first to the second village, it took 14 months. We were talking about 2013, 14, etc. So Gram Urja by that time had no cash. So we were just surviving because, I have a home in Bombay and someone has a home in Pune. We don't pay EMI. I never paid EMI or rent in my life. And that's the only reason why I could have survived. Otherwise, there's no way on earth I could have managed this, honestly. And Anshuman also pretty much similar. Because there was literally zero cash flow. We're talking of 2012, 13. I think for us, the team, we could somehow manage. First villages happened. And we are trying to. So then Tata Trust did a small village in Karnataka. Then ICICI came in. ICICI, so we had built this whole set of prospective villages in North Karnataka. There's this forest area called Dandeli, very close to Belgaum and all that. So heavy bordering Goa and Karnataka. So we had done some 25 village, surveys and prepared project proposals and all. And we used to take it to Bank of America. We used to take it to ICICI and all of that. So ICICI has this fund. It's called Technology Development Fund. It comes from the old development finance institution background of ICICI, and it was the only private sector DFI back then, right, in the 80s and 90s. If you remember, TDICI also was a pretty popular place where a lot of IM guys also went. So they have these lines from organizations like, these development financial institutions from Europe, like KfW and some other French ones, so they would kind of tell ICICI, you can go and invest, and whatever money you make, and they would kind of take the currency risk. They'd lend in marks or whatever back then, and they would take the currency risk. But if the investment was a success, then the profits would be plowed back into a rolling fund kind of situation. So they had some capital from some of these successes that they had earlier, and they decided that they would like to try this. So there was a gentleman called Jai Singh Dhumal there who heads this. And so it was an interesting conversation. We used to go to him, and so at that time Chanda Kochar was the CEO. So he'd say that, no, we don't want Karnataka, we want Bombay. So why do you want Bombay? No, because our CEO needs to visit this place. So this is so capital goes where it's convenient for it to go, not where it's required. So I said, we'll hunt. But Bombay mein main kidhar unelectrified village leke. So it's not easy, right? But there is in Thana, the adjoining district, Thana district, there are a large number of tribal hamlets actually. And some of those hamlets are unelectrified. So somehow through our Anshuman's earlier connections and all, we identified this set of villages. And we said, okay, now we are ready with Thane, which is about 100 kilometers. Now I can't find anything closer than that, but if Chanda wants to come, and why not? So the fun part was, let's do it. So Mr. Dhuma, so after we had done some initial to and fro in terms of how much money would be required and what's the budget, etc. So they said, okay, let's do a field visit. So Mr. Jai Singh Dhumal and one of his juniors, Chandrakant, and we went to this village, this bunch of villages in Jawahar Taluka, which is about 100 kilometers from Bombay. So the visit was very exciting. First you reach Jawahar, it takes 2.5 hours. And from there to the village, it takes 2.5 hours, or let's say 1.5 hours. And the last half an hour of the journey, no jeep driver in Bombay will be able to do that journey. It has to be a local there. There's no road essentially. It's like you go probably at, it's like a vertical drop almost. And I don't know how he kind of negotiates that. We did some hamlets somewhere, and there were some 7-8 hamlets there. So in the journey to Jawar, we were talking about Chanda come with that. Okay, I keep shut. I know that this is like absurdity to the next level. It's not. So he sees, and of course they see, अरे बाप रे, ऐसे villages Bombay के पास में है ऐसा 80 kilometers and all that, 70 years of independence, all that, and it's still not electrified, etc. So yeah, so he was then quite excited about the project, but when we came up from that from the valley and back to, so no more discussions on Chanda visiting those places. Chanda not going to spend time coming unless she creates a helipad there or something of that sort temporary. So anyway, so that set of those 7 villages got inaugurated in 2015. After that, we had some, Rahul Namjoshi, another junior of ours, and 2 months back, he works in Bank of America in the treasury as an agent, forex dealing there. So he wanted to invest. He and some of his colleagues from Bank of America invested in Ramurja. The Bank of America at that point of time was also looking at getting into sustainability, energy access. So around 2013, as you know, there was this 2% rule where the government of India brought in a rule that all corporates of a certain size needed to, it was in a form of kind of taxation, right? 2% of your net profits, average net profits of the preceding 3 years, you need to invest in CSR. And often that goes to Prime Minister's Relief Fund because that's the easiest thing to do, just kind of, But some people are kind of keen on doing their own projects. So Bank of America had set up a team, and they, for whatever reason, they had globally decided that sustainability and energy access is something that they'd be interested in. So after this ICICI success, 8 or 10 villages, then we approached, and because we had Rahul and all inside, they were able to kind of just talk to the CSR committee within Bank of America. So they were kind of happy. And what happened in the Bank of America, because by that time our preparation to do these kind of villages was extremely high. We were very confident of being able to roll out pretty soon. So they gave us I think a 61 lakh grant in this next year to do 2 villages. And that time they also gave money to World Wildlife Foundation to do villages in Sundarbans. And Schneider Electric was doing that project in the Sundarbans. So they have to shell out this money before 31st March. The financial year ends. So 25th March or something, we got the money. And about 50 days later, I called up Neha Bharadwaj is the person, saying that, we've completed this villages. So you can, you should come and see it now. So she was saying, what do you mean completed the villages? So she thought that we had completed surveying the villages, something like that. So no, we've actually finished because our preparation is very high right now. So once the money comes in, it takes only about 50 days or so. She's saying, no, but that's not possible. No, you come and see, the villages are up and running right now. So she was stunned because Schneider, which was doing World Wildlife, they were to do 1,000 households in the Sundarbans. And even after a year after that, they had only completed 70 households. 7% of their money had. See, this is not easy because, especially a corporate which is kind of supplying stuff to urban centers, to go and do an implementation in rural areas, very difficult. It's not the same. Challenges are many, right? So she was kind of extremely happy at the way we were able to turn it around. And they then started doing larger amounts. Bank of America, it's a niche. Basically, they have treasury and corporate operations in India, and highly profitable. So every year they started doing very large amounts. And second year, we managed to convince them to. So now Maharashtra, right? Maharashtra is relatively better developed. So we then wanted to try and do something in Jharkhand, because Jharkhand is very interesting. It's a very highly tribal dominated population. In terms of percentage of population, it has the highest tribal population in the country. Jharkhand is of course split from Bihar, right? South Bihar is what is Jharkhand right now. Fascinatingly, and I keep telling the story too, it is the state which is in a sense the earliest. I mean, Bombay, Maharashtra, of course, but in some ways the earliest to be industrialized in the country. Yeah, right. You had Tisco in 1907. You had Telco in 1944, and lots of coal plants, etc., etc. But even now, 50, 80 kilometers from Jamshedpur proper is, of course, I've not visited, but it's supposed to be excellent. But 50, 60 kilometers from there, you have really high levels of misery, if you want to call it that, in terms of human development indices stuff. It's terrible. Most of those were very underdeveloped. So we wanted to say that, okay, let's do Jharkhand, because we by that time had a team which was willing to go to those kind of villages, also Jharkhand. So, but in Bank of America, the problem was, to get Hong Kong to sign off, because those days you can always read a headline which says that some telecom tower got blown up somewhere by some land accident, and the village name would be very similar. There are 5,000 Rampurs in the country, for instance. So,
Did you get Bhatwadekar to sign off?
sorry?
Bhatwadekar was in Hong Kong, Bank of America. He would have been signing off.
Yeah, right. So point is, I worked in Bank of America, so to get a sign off, 97 we wanted to purchase a PC, and the purchase cost was some, say, 40,000 at that time, and the monthly rental was some 10,000, something like that. Okay, 4 months of monthly rental would cover the capital cost, and obviously computers will last. But for the capital expense, Hong Kong has to sign off, and for the renting, the local guy could sign off. So we would all rent. So all those kind of absurdities happen in multinational. They get covered up because the operation is generally so profitable. But at the micro level, there are all these madnesses. So anyway, so she was very paranoid. I don't know, how will I do Jharkhand? You won't get travel. Somehow we managed to convince them, because Tata Trust, of course, because of Tata's background in Jamshedpur and so on, were kind of okay with doing. So we managed to open Tata Trust and Bank of America, and we did some 15, 18 villages in Jharkhand in 2015, 16 at that time. And those were extremely successful. So even Bank of America, I don't think Hong Kong actually knows how crazy some of the situations can be in places like Jharkhand. So even our own team, sometimes in some villages, we tell them to stop work by 5 o'clock and come back to them. Because at this point in time, the people there know that this is actual good development work. I mean, when I say people, I'm talking of not people like you and me, but people who can get violent, to put it mildly. So, but if you are doing development-oriented work, so their clip is about mining and so on and so forth. And they believe that they've been kind of given a rod. It might be true, it might not be true, whatever. But essentially, once they realize that you're coming in to do some development, the villagers themselves will make sure that nothing happens to your guys. So I know I have not lived in those villages during implementation, but some of my team members tell me that, when they were doing some of these implementations, one of the implementation, 2 o'clock at night, somewhere about 2 kilometers, there was some major band baja drama, something happening. So when they asked the क्या हो रहा है उधर, नहीं वो जो है ना वो नक्सल को उन्होंने अरेस्ट किया था, वो छूट गया आज, तो उधर वेलकम सेरेमनी हो रहा है विलेज में. So there have been members of my team who've been kind of guns have been pointed to their foreheads, and so that's happened, but it's not like a very frequent kind of thing. It's not as if it's happening every day.
How's language? How is it mostly
So in
Hindi,
Jharkhand,
dialects?
if you can do Hindi, you can work, but the language there is actually something called, they have their all local dialects, etc. But they follow Hindi now. It's well integrated. You can kind of manage it. But actually, among themselves, they'll be speaking local dialects, which you can't really follow easily, unless you are. So Jharkhand, like I said, we somehow managed to pull that off despite Bank of America's reservations. The person here, the CSR person, was very encouraging. She said, okay, chalo, let's manage somehow. And those places, the point is, the impact is much more than even Maharashtra. See, what happens in Maharashtra is, they see that electricity is maybe 1 year away, it can come in. But these places, they know that will not happen. There's no way it's going to happen in that place. It won't happen for 10 years.
I was just looking at your website. Some of the pictures are amazing. Just show some of those videos, some of those things.
Yeah, I'll show that. So let me see. Yeah. So this is a general presentation, but so this is our first village, I think, Darewadi. You can see this, right? But yeah, these are the kind of places, and this is like likely to be like 10 kilometers away from the nearest other settlement after this, right? So it's very remote. So this, if you look at this, this is a picture that I always like to show. The women, with you can see it, right?
Yeah.
So women traveling to fetch water.
That's right.
This is
So
a
that means electrification to get borewell water, all that changes for all these people, right?
exactly, because it saves actually 4 hours a day per person.
Right.
For women, I mean, every household, it's the woman's job to get water, and you see them balancing three pots. It's a common occurrence across very large parts of tribal India, because water sources are somewhat, and in the monsoons you can imagine, because these pathways are difficult, right? And what do you do? So solar pumping works very well in these situations, because
And
pumping.
I'm assuming but cell phone access is one of the biggest things, right? Has that changed because you now gave them?
So all of them have cell phones. Telecom towers are not necessarily well enough penetrated in each of these villages. So within the villages, within let's say a 200-meter radius, they'll have to go to some place to kind of get the network. So to that extent, it is okay, but it's not like, it's again not like on-demand cell phone. You might not have access in every spot of the village. But broadly, yes, telecom. But how will telecom access help water fetching?
No, I mean, you're changing the whole lifestyle.
Some part of their life
right?
changes, of course. I totally. So the lot of the electricity is used for mobile charging and lighting. Mobile charging is a very big use of energy in these places. So if you look at it in terms of kilowatt hours, mobile charging is what, like it's like minimal. I mean, it's not even like 1/10 of a kilowatt hour one cycle in most cases. But if you go to the local dukan, he'll charge you 10 rupees per charge. So in effect, he's being charged 500 rupees per kilowatt. In effect, I mean, if you were to make that numbers like that, right? And we pay even in the most expensive places, say in Bombay, I'm paying 12, 13 rupees per kilowatt hour. Most of India pays 6, 7 rupees per kilowatt hour, right? So the poorer people are actually spending on a per kilowatt hour basis much more on electricity. Like it works out to 500 rupees, 800 rupees, crazy numbers. So I was saying that Jharkhand, the impact was extremely high. A lot of villages, they started doing atta chakki. I have a picture of that somewhere. One second, I'll just. Impact. So you have these, this small little micro enterprises within the village, something or the other they keep doing. So this is an important slide. So, this is what I talk about all the time. We kind of make sure that, so when we did our first Jharkhand village, what we did was, we had Darewadi, right? We actually got people from rural Jharkhand, made them travel all the way to Darewadi to see how this is working in terms of the community and in terms of technology, everything. Because unless you do an exposure visit, they don't get familiar with what they're getting into, right? So we actually arranged a trip all the way from Jharkhand to Pune, made them see. And tribals, generally, it's a homogeneous community. They understand, broader sense the language. I mean, not necessarily the spoken language, but they kind of understand the life. They kind of appreciate the challenges, etc. So at all points of time, before we do a project, there's huge amount of community interaction and, in a sense, selling the concept to them, right? Explaining to them. Now Jharkhand is easier because there are hundreds of, we've done 50, 70 projects in Jharkhand itself. So if you have a new set of villages, you can take them there itself. So that community interaction, designing for aspirations, as if you're not only giving them basic lighting and just that, like I mentioned earlier, if they need TV, if they need to do a commercial enterprise, if they want to, do education there, all of that facilitate because of energy. Then the part about metering, if you don't meter, it can become very challenging because people can overuse and then it'll all just be a downward spiral from there. So the tariff, but this is always explained to the villagers. The reason why we are collecting this tariff is big. So in our villages, typically the collection rate is extremely high. If you look at a discom typically in India, most of them in rural India, the collections will typically be poor, especially in these kind of states. But here, of course, it's not a apples to apples comparison. There's no commercial entity which is charging them money. They're collecting it for their own, for their own, creating a corpus for their next battery replacement and so on. But having said that, it's still very rarely do collections fall below 90% and so on. 90-95% of the people actually pay. Some people pay large amounts, 400, 500 rupees, etc. Also, so, and it is the ownership, sense of ownership, right? It is their project. So, and once the women realize that their lives are becoming easier because they're moving from fetching water for 3 hours a day to just 5 minutes a day, and it's a dramatic transformation, right? So then they're very keen to ensure that the projects don't fail. Most of our projects have been very, very limited technical problems. Because solar is actually a fairly robust technology in that sense. If you use good technology, we've had some challenges in Jharkhand because the lightning levels in Jharkhand, and this is what we learned, lightning levels are crazy in Jharkhand. What the exact reason is not known, but so many of our inverters would conk off in the first year, but then we managed to do very high level surge protection devices and so on and so forth. So with all of that, now we are stable even on that front. So, but aside of that, there's been very little techniques. See, this is a very easy technical story. The problem is, how do you actually go and implement in a village or have a team which can implement a well-designed system in a rural area? Design not only the technical sense, in a rural area, that is a challenge. So Bank of America, after 3 years, their NGO partner who was helping us do the social interaction, they said, no, we can't give projects to Gram Urja every year because there'll be an audit issue. So let's see. So they kind of tried to engage with somebody else, Schneider incidentally. And they tried, but after, so the 4th year, we were not given the project. But after 6 months, they came back to us saying that, "Arey, jaldi se kar lo, because nahi ho raha humse." Nobody can do it. In the sense, it is difficult. And I don't go to these villages now to, it's kudos to the team, totally. Anshuman is actually he's extremely good at creating this team kind of structure, right? He's done all of that. So kudos to him and the team. But to actually create that team there, which can, and now what has happened is in many of our, so a village that we did in year 1, we, 2 or 3 youngsters from there now work with us. So they're tribals, they've seen the process, they work with us now, and they implement our projects in other locations. So that is something which we have managed to do in terms of being able to create the skill development it was not like something that we had planned in a concerted, well thought through fashion, but people from there, they learned that, oh, this is something we can do. And they are now part, they kind of work for us on a contract basis from time to time. So there, of course, income levels have gone up tremendously in that sense. They come with us to other remote locations to implement and so on. So that's been another major impact in many of these places. It's because imagine going to a place where when you travel, you possibly can't come back to a town every day when you're implementing. So for the first 20 days of implementation, there's no light there, right? So they have to stay there in the night in the village, eat the food from the locals there, kind of work there for the first 30 days before they can
So the type of people who you
These are all
attract,
tribal.
at the initial phase must have been very different, right? They must have had a lot of passion to do this. That's why.
So I'm saying that Anshuman deserves a lot of credit for that part. He's been very good at building this team. But so what happens? A lot of churn happened initially because people after first day they go. So one guy from I mentioned this rural shores village of ours, right? Sitapur in Lucknow. So there was a person from there who joined our team. Now, again, maybe most of you are not familiar, but Lucknow, so rural India is not like one homogeneous entity. Right? There are 10 different shades or maybe more. The rural shores village was what we now use the term mainstream village. Essentially, it has all the usual caste dynamics. There's somebody killing each other for some nonsense. But because they were unemployed and they sort of saw how we do this project, they wanted to join us. So this person called Mukesh Mishra, so he was from Sitapur. So he said, okay, I'll come. So we took him the first day. He joined us in a Ranchi team. And then one of our team members took him to our villages. So en route, they had to stop somewhere, and he got down from the jeep, and he saw some policemen running around and some. I don't know exactly why I wasn't there, but and he asked, "Kya ho raha hai?" "Nahi, wo Naxali ko maar rahe hai," and all that. So this guy got really scared. So he immediately ran away. He just went back to his pet. He didn't want. He said, "Nahi." So we said, "Boss, kuch nahi hoga. Aap daro mat. Aapko kuch nahi karenge log." But no, so that kind of answers your question. Even there, it's quite difficult. There are people who have come in and realize that it's not for them. It's not their cup of tea, right? So they've kind of gone back. But now what happens is, now there's a core which is pretty solid in terms of being able to implement, and they have their acquaintances, they get them, and so on. So it's not so much of a challenge to get teams now. But yeah, this is a problem. People don't.
So which part of India, Samir? I know you said Jharkhand, but where else are the big places where it's not electrified?
Like I said, the problem in electrification is the definition. Hamlets are often not electrified in many states, even now. But typically, the biggest problem even today would be places like Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Orissa, in terms of total lack of electrification in total. Okay. Now, the other problem is that, and obviously it's beyond, it'll take a lot of time for me to explain some of these things, but three-phase power is not very good in many rural areas in the country. So three-phase power in the agrarian belts. So that is a problem in large parts of the country. It's not only these places. And especially when you have coal shortages and all, that's the first thing to kind of get affected, right? So for a lot of villages which are otherwise having decent quality of electricity, at the farm, the quality of electricity might be extremely poor. So you still can implement solar pumps at those locations. So which then enables them to do one more crop. So we do a lot of projects in pumping also now. Lots of projects. IKEA Foundation, and not directly to us, but a group called Social Alpha Sustain Plus, which is funded by IKEA Foundation and Tata Trust. We do a lot of work for them in terms of implementing solar pumps now. And that is in every state. It can be Madhya Pradesh, it can be Uttar Pradesh, it can be Bihar, it can be Gujarat, it can be Maharashtra, right? But the kind of villages that I spoke of right now, in terms of totally unelectrified with no hope of electricity coming, that would be largely, so Northeast, of course, will be a big issue there. We haven't done too many projects there. But otherwise, it will be typically Orissa, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, that tribal belt. Most other places, it's much better. But again, three-phase power and certainty of three-phase power is still, even now, is a big issue in many places. And that constrains how much and again, diesel-based pumping, right? Solar, so they don't have electricity, good enough electricity to do pumping. So they generally used to use diesel, but diesel prices also in the last 18 to 20 months or whatever, 24 months, shot through the roof, right? So solar pumping is very, very
and maybe tell us a little bit more on efficiency, right? How efficient is, I mean, solar for doing a pump, it's high wattage, right? So
no, you can do what you do 3,000 watts, I mean 3 kilowatt peak, 5 kilowatt peak system. See, efficiency is, so what is the efficiency? How much of the energy that falls on the panels is being converted to electricity finally, usable electricity finally? So efficiency when we started off was 16, 17%, and now it's about 18, 20, 21%, etc. But that is essentially not a big issue in rural India, because what does efficiency help you to do? It helps you to give out more amount of electricity per square foot of area. I mean, a rooftop plant in a Bombay tower, a highly efficient solar panel is preferable to, because space is also a constraint, right? So a 1 meter square panel, if it can generate 20% more electricity than another panel, it obviously makes sense in my rooftop, for instance, because the space is a constraint. But in rural, you saw the location, right? That is not a problem. The cost is the problem, right? So you have to figure out where. So there are some highly efficient panels, which we don't necessarily use in all our, because they are 20% more expensive also. I mean, you don't necessarily need, but what is the efficient panel doing? It's kind of giving you more output per unit of area, right? So that's not so relevant for us in many, from place to place, it makes some sense, but that is what efficiency is. So there are two parts. One is how much of the electricity is being converted. So that is efficiency, okay, just to kind of clarify. How much of the solar energy that falls on the panel is being converted into electrical energy, that is So if 18%, that is 18% efficiency. Other part of a solar is the plant load factor of a typical solar plant versus a coal plant. Because solar energy falls on a plant only for between say 6 or 7 a.m. to about 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. etc. Right? So you anyway lose out. So a megawatt of solar versus a megawatt of coal, for instance, a megawatt of solar, roughly in India it will be 1.6 million units per year over 365 days, 1.6 million. But a typical coal plant, which works at even say 80% plant load factor, will be producing 4 times that. So you cannot compare a megawatt. You can't compare power and say, oh, we have 1 megawatt of solar and 1 megawatt of coal. 1 megawatt of coal is 4 times more power. Any I'm saying even hydro, it's much more than solar. So I'm just saying, just kind of to clarify that efficiency is one thing, PLF is another thing. So these are 2 different factors, right? So but efficiency per se is not a huge consideration for us, right? Because like I said, most of it, the land is not a constraint at all. But it helps, of course. As panels become more and more efficient, the cost also tends to go down per.
And what's the typical cost of a project? Like just some rough, like 10 houses in a village type.
Right.
What's
so what do we do? What does Gram Urja do? We go to a village where there is no electricity pole, right? So you're starting from creating what's called the public distribution network, PDN as it's called. The pole and the cables, aerial bunch conductors, the small transformers, and each. So all of that also we do. We do the distribution infrastructure. We do the home electrification also, because you have to, these are unelectrified homes. So you have to put in the meters, the MCCBs, whatever, and the wiring inside, etc. That is also part of our, right? And then you have to create a kind of a control room where you can house the batteries and the inverters and so on, and then the panels. So all of this put together. So a typical village of about 50 households, you can do at a cost of about 25 lakhs, roughly, all this put together. And it will give them enough electricity to use 1 kilowatt hour per household per day, roughly, right? And in these locations, 1 kilowatt hour per household per day is pretty decent. They don't even come close to using the full capacity, right? So that's the broad 25 lakhs, we can say, for a 50 household village.
And Samir, how does the commercials work for you? Means, is it a grant based or profitability and all that? Like,
right. I'll explain that. So for Gram Urja, we don't have any economic interest in the tariff, right? In the sense, no part of the tariff actually comes back to us. But so we are a for-profit. We are registered as a for-profit. So we are essentially you can say an EPC plus, right? There is the entire design, implementation, all of that, but we are also putting all this together, right? For a bank of America is interested in spending, say, $2 million in rural India in a specific year. They give us, say, $500,000. So they understand that to put all this together, you need to make your margins. How is Gram Urja going to sustain, right? So in a project, we get about 20% margins, 20-25% margins. That is the so our commercials is in the, so we are
that is your revenue.
Yeah. That's because in these places to actually imagine that you can put in an asset and it'll give you an annuity, and that's going to be, there are people who impact investors and all come. We've always been, it's not going to happen in these places. If I were to move to the same location and say that you pay me tariff instead of putting it into, I'm sure the collection efficiency that I spoke of, which was what, 80-90%, it'll drop down to 50%. They don't pay you. They'll make it more difficult. I'm not saying they won't, but to keep going there and then because you imagine going to this village to collect 3,000 rupees of, from me to arrange a jeep from Bombay to go there, it's cost 3,000 rupees.
Right.
So that we are not into that game at all. So it's an EPC model, really. Yeah.
It's जहाँ पे motorable road नहीं है, वहाँ panel कैसे पहुँचाता है?
So I don't know if I have a videos on this, but I'll share it on the group. So the villagers सिर पे उठा के लेके जाते हैं.
क्या?
I'll show you. So I have it on my WhatsApp. I don't know. Yeah, लेके जाते हैं. I'll show you. I'll send it to you. So that is the point. So panels is not the difficult one. Imagine battery. A battery bank can weigh up to like 500 kilos. So I'll show you some. I'll share with you some videos. I don't know, have it offline. Where the villages
You had shared this sometime back, a few years back. You shared it on the WhatsApp group.
Correct. I'll try and hunt that again. So motorable road nahi hai, that's the challenge, no? So there was another interesting. So Azure Power, which is a foundation capital investing company. I've asked Ashu about it. So Azure Power went to Jharkhand, and so their interest is in setting up the larger, 200 megawatt solar plants to kind of feed into the grid, right? So the interest in that is becoming independent power producers. For whatever reason, they went to Jharkhand, and so the problem for us is government tenders. Like in Jharkhand, they'll say you have to be a 50 crore turnover company. I mean, nobody qualifies. Those who qualify have no interest in doing these kind of. So anyway, Azure Power, in some, I think, fit of madness, they went, it's okay, we'll do 100 projects. So they went and quoted some crazy price without understanding the intricacies of of implementing in these locations. And they got the tender, okay. And then they went to the first village and said, "Kod karega kod?" So they came to Gramurja and said, "Arey, you all are doing this, we will do it." So a small part of their tender they outsourced to us. I mean, they would give us all the material. Our team would have to go and implement. So in one of the villages we went, we had to lay a road for 5 kilometers because even in the unmotorable sense, it was very difficult. There was a 5-kilometer pathway that we had to, and they funded that and all. How would you get stuff to those places? Uske baad, Azure Power, they get the money from the government, whatever bribery, whatever happened, and all those projects have failed. Hundreds of such projects. I've been part of implementing this as an outsourced entity of Azure Power. I can tell you for sure that none of, and those are not as old as Gramurja's village, because they just went and some villager got up in the morning, he said, truck with panels, he doesn't even know, because there's some target somewhere that we should electrify every village in the country. Truck पहुंच गया, सब लोग उतार रहे, panels वाले villages को पता ही नहीं क्यों हो रहा है. So they have no sense of ownership, they don't know what to do. And because it's a tender, government tender, and there must be some payoffs and all that, I don't know. But so they kind of compromise in quality of inverters and all. Out of 100, I know that at least 90-95 have totally stopped functioning within 12 to 18 months. Colossal waste of money. But the same government will not allow us to bid for that because we don't meet their turnover criteria. So for instance, we could meet that turnover criteria by merging into, say, one of Karthik's entities, maybe, which is selling something else totally. As long as it's just turnover, it doesn't matter. They don't care whether it's an electricity act. There's no company which does this kind of electricity access, which will have a turnover greater than Gramurja. But they do something else. So we can do that kind of financial kind of form a consortium or something. Yeah.
Sami, is this now still, and I'm sorry, I might have missed this because I had to take a call, but is this still funded almost entirely by CSR and foundation money? Is that the idea? So the capex is still coming from there. You guys are obviously probably the best rural utility EPC project developer right now. So you do all of, and then the tariff is basically whatever the market will support.
So we explained to them that you are essentially collecting this to kind of address the battery replacement problem that's going to come in, right?
Right.
You decide on a tariff. We don't care. I mean, you can collect once in 6 months, but if you don't collect regularly, then when that hits you, it'll probably not happen, and the whole project will fail at that time, right? So that's the way we sell it to them.
So I mean, I guess what I'm trying to see is that how does that, obviously this is phenomenal impact. Yes, the stuff that, when we were in B school or engineering college, we used to get all starry-eyed about doing social impact kind of stuff. You guys, you've actually made it real. So kudos for that. How do you amplify this? Obviously you have a core team of whatever, I guess 15, 20, 30 people by now. How does this become something which is I don't know, thousands of people and significant more impact? Yeah.
So the again, kind of again.
Samir, can I think we can just stop sharing and then we can, since you are talking.
Yeah.
You can see everybody.
Yeah.
Remove
Right.
the pin also.
So here, there are a couple of ways to answer this question. One of the problems in India is we're kind of stuck in the middle, right? It's not, so there are many companies which are broadly in the same space as us, trying to do rural access. It could be home, people who are distributing home lighting systems or stuff like that, of Indian origin. There's one company called Green Light Planet, who essentially grown rapidly in Africa. Because there the problem is they are nowhere close to us in terms of access. Here we are kind of in a middle, somewhere in the middle, where where the quality of electricity access is still very poor in rural areas. But at the same time, it can sporadically get good. And that is the challenge for players like Gram Urja. What happens is, solar typically is a capex intensive space. There's no real opex. So if you really want to show IRR on this project, you have to stretch the Excel sheet to 15 years at least. That's a simple thing. It's not going to happen. And the problem is, in 15 years, there'll always be a 2-year period in some village or the other where, it could be election time, for instance, right? And you can, for a 6-month period, to provide good electricity at free cost is not difficult for anyone. It happens. So moment that happens, our business model collapses, right? So now Africa, it's not even reached that level, right? There are lots of places where the grid itself is not even reached, right? So that's why Green Light Planet and all is able to scale up much more in places like Africa. I'm trying to kind of get to the root of the problems that scaling would have, face in our kind of situation. So sporadically, electricity gets good in many parts. Sporadically, for a 3-month phase, some place or the other is good, and that is enough to do in your business. So that is one of the reasons we go to very remote locations where grid extension is extremely difficult. We go to places of that sort. Having said that, some parts of solar are actually very viable against even diesel gensets, definitely. Farming, I think when you were away, I was speaking about farming. We are doing extremely large number of pumps now. So in terms of number of projects, although the projects are of smaller value, we've done like 10 times a project in FY22 compared to FY21, etc. Because we focused a lot on pumps. Pumps, you can roll out a pump a day, for instance. If your team is well trained and you get your sourcing and all together, whereas a village will take 30 days to set up, 30, 40 days to set up. So scale in that, because there, what is the reason why? Because in a pump, you don't have to firstly set the public distribution network, right? The PDM cost goes away. Secondly, storage cost goes away totally when you're talking about an irrigation pump. Because ultimately, when the sun shines, you can irrigate the field at that time, right? You don't have to necessarily. So you don't need storage of the electricity, because battery is a very significant recurring cost in the whole system. If you take away battery, if you take away PDM, then what happens is solar pumps can compete against diesel for sure, but even against good quality grid also, it would be kind of. So the moment you're saying you have a technology which is commercially viable, as in against competitors, it can kind of hold its own, then you are talking of scale, right? So I'm saying that we have scaled a lot in the last year, and we expect FY23 also to be an extremely good year. Because like I said, here what happens is now, it's not necessarily all donors. Just to answer, on pumps, the initial impetus came from, like I said, IKEA Foundation wanted to do a lot of pumps. Along with Tata Trust, they did a lot of pumps. But in pockets where the farmers are relatively more prosperous, they're willing to put up to 50-60% of the capex even in this year, and we believe that in some places it can be even more. So when that market opens up, so I think Samurai, for instance, as a person who, there's a company called Claro which used to focus on pumping. The only, in my view and my understanding, one mistake they made is they kind of depended on government projects. Problem with government projects is that the whole, your receivables will go for you'll have like 4 years worth received sometimes. I've seen the balance sheet. They got into a major mess because people won't pay on time. How do you fund working capital then? In 2011, 12, 13, I used to be in MNRE Delhi every 3 months, firstly they'll the secretary will change. He'll go to railways next month. Then next month he'll have somebody coming from Urdu department. Minor, firstly that continues. Secondly, payment related issues. They themselves face budgetary constraints from time to time. And this could, I'm not talking only central government, central, state, it has to be shared. State governments often have financial difficulties. They want to push, because, in India, the budgetary process is cash accounting yet, right? It's not accrual accounting. So they don't want to pay in March. Why would you pay in March? I can show a lower fiscal deficit. Stuff like that. All these kind of considerations for small players like us to navigate that is extremely challenging. So we stayed out of the government projects, tendering and all of that. And secondly, there's no one who has any incentive to make sure that the payment comes out even if you've done the project. There's just not, there's a classical principal agent problem. So, but now, given where pricing is currently, where diesel pricing is currently, etc., there's a lot of opportunity in pumping, if you ask me, in terms of scale, where because the end consumer has an incentive to buy from you, because his alternate cost, means the alternative to solar, which is diesel in his case, many a time, is more expensive. We can actually sell to them, and that becomes like a very different ballgame then. So scale happens much more. Donor-based financing is challenging. I mean, no doubt about it. But the other angle that's happening now is, and we've had conversations. Just last week I was with Caterpillar. They want to do energy access. There was Novozymes. All of these, there's a net zero game that's happening, right? So people who are, running large data warehouses or whatever, consuming huge amounts of electricity there, they want to net off by saying that they are also investing in solar in some, and it could be their own, may not be a formal structure like carbon credits earlier, but to kind of talk at to their investors or to the board or to the stakeholders in general. There are a lot of these people who are now saying that, okay, I'll put in $5 million in solarizing some villages in India, etc. Those conversations are happening now. It's not classical CSR. It's a little more, it's a little different because they want to kind of in their mind offset the carbon part, right? So absolutely, those things are also happening. And again, they don't have too many players to go to who can implement in really difficult areas. So therefore, we have had those conversations with several. So Caterpillar is one such organizer. The heavy industry, the crane manufacturer, whatever you call it. Right? So so solar pumps at one level. The other thing is we do biogas projects also. Again, pipe biogas, because cooking gases are extremely, versus today's LPG prices, biogas is definitely it's more operationally intensive. Therefore, it's more challenging to actually keep it running. But the economics also are much better, especially in today's LPG. And cooking is a bigger problem in the country than electricity. It's something that we don't realize. Large parts of the country use firewood or cow dung cake, as in dung cake, to do this. Of course, with Ujjwala and all, there was some move towards LPG, but now the subsidies have been removed for that. So, and at these prices, people are finding it difficult to refill. The LPG still, LPG is cleaner than firewood and dung cake and all of that. But now pricing is becoming a bit of challenge for them. So versus that, biogas is also scalable. And that actually can be taken to a financial investor in terms of, if you have a whole bouquet of assets which are generating, because carbon also becomes a big story in biogas. Sorry,
So quick question. Since you already have the electric infrastructure, why not use the biogas to generate electricity and provide people with electric hot plates and things like that, rather than actually build?
Because you are converting biogas to electricity and then to heat. So there is a classical engineering, you obviously lose efficiency because ultimately you run a turbine, right? In that sense. So there's that problem where you need electricity for, suppose you want to, instead, the better thing would be to have a higher power solar, because solar again is less, operationally intensive. So what you can do is you can do induction cooking. You can use electricity-based cooking also there directly. You can use that. But converting biogas into electricity and then reconverting into heat is what we've realized is that doesn't make that much sense rather than directly pumping the gas like CNG, like, in urban India, like in Bombay and all, you get pipe natural gas. Right? So you can do that in the way we have those kind of projects. In fact, we have many villages that is, not as well developed as our solar thing, but we've recently got a ICICI grant to do villages in Jharkhand again, where we are doing pipe natural gas.
Okay.
A central biogas plant, and each household gets piped gas for cooking.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, definitely. I think one of that, I was just thinking that from an impact perspective, it kind of, if you use the existing pipeline, which you've already built,
right,
and then, maybe even like you said about pumping, then you're bringing water. So you're basically making yourself into the enabler for rural utilities.
That's correct.
Right? Rather than sort of just electricity or energy. Yeah.
So we do water.
Puja is your name. But,
gas.
Yeah. No, this is awesome, man.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of tales, but it's difficult to recount everything. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Sammy, just a question. So isn't really battery the trouble that you're facing? Isn't that where you're facing your challenges? Cost or the replacement?
No. The remoteness also creates cost. Right? Like I said, if I have to go to, say, a village even in Jawar, I have to hire a jeep. I can't take public transport and go there. Because the last 5 kilometers, there's no access. And it's impossible to necessarily find a jeep there. So therefore, I'm giving an example. I'd have to hire a jeep from Bombay and go there. So just to go to a village and come back, if there's some problem, that becomes a 5,000 rupee cost, which would be typically the, fortnightly collection of tariff for them. It's not happening. I mean, we don't sometimes understand how remoteness can create its own set of issues. Because there's a low number of people, like it's not very high load there. Right? It's not very high load there. But because the remoteness costs are high, so batteries, of course, battery is a very major challenge, but it's not as if the battery challenge go to dissipate or go down, let's say the cost go down 20%, everything else becomes viable. It's not as simple as that in our kind of villages.
No, but what Gurmani was saying, right, as opposed to one versus the other source of energy, could that, remove the battery problem altogether?
No. So you're saying that if I were to put biogas, solar, hybrid, is that what the question is? Yeah. So we've tried hybrid also in some places. Yeah. So point is, like, the good thing about solar is in India, especially, it's pretty much available all across the country for most times of the year, except some parts of the monsoon and all of that. But so we did a solar micro hydro, actually pico hydro hybrid in Karnataka, because the Western Ghats, Karnataka, there's very high capacity streams, and so using a concept of pumps as turbines, we did a solar, again, this was with another German, as a pilot with another German turbine manufacturer, as in pump manufacturer. So first year there was a drought there. Yeah. So first time in 50 years something, that stream dried up. So solar is so far, fortunately for all of us, the sun has not decided to pay to end totally. But all other sources of energy have. So I read from time to time casually. I'm told that because UK, for instance, depends so much on offshore wind, right? And I think 8-10 months back, offshore wind, the wind was the wind speeds were much lower than what the average is for the earlier. I mean, it's just an article that I've read, so I'm not an expert in this. I'm saying, so renewables comes with those kind of challenges. Solar mostly is predictable. The challenges. Stream dried up.
You're saying solar is predictable. You're saying that in your experience, solar is predictable. Is that what you're saying?
In terms of what you're getting into, yeah. So from historical averages, so kind of the irradiance in a particular spot.
Okay.
You know that it's going to go at. I mean, it's intermittent, of course, in the sense that.
Yeah.
That's but there's a predictability of that intermittency, unlike wind.
Yeah. So linked to that, I wanted to ask you something, because I think one of the things which you pointed out as a metric, I think it's pretty awesome, is that 3 to 4 hours a day for somebody to save, sometimes even the daughters with their mothers.
Right.
So that's important. have you been able to measure, in a
Yes.
sense, almost at a micro level, the impact on the economy now? The women in the household are saving 4 to 6 hours a day, let's say.
Right.
How is that impacting the economy? Are they then utilizing their time somewhere else? Or,
Yeah.
maybe they're just happy watching TV, and that's great. It's awesome. But is that really happening or not happening?
Right. So we've had 2 or 3 different types of impact assessments that have been conducted in the past and have been done continuously. One is Bank of America does a very strong audit, and that's done by Deloitte. It's a third-party audit that they continuously monitor impact that is being created in these locations in terms of actual difference in income levels, but also on the more softer. Are they getting? Is there less? So, for instance, street lights in a village can prevent snake bites, which could be as absurd. I mean, for us, we don't realize. So that was also measured by, I think, so we've had. So the short answer to that is yes. Some do it as part of their program. As a part of the CSR, they've allocated some X% to impact audit, right? So, and it's done to all the villages. It's not a sample. They go to all the villages that we implemented and do I think the audit lasts for 2 or 3 years. They go every year and see what is the difference that's been made. And I have some reports on that also in terms of the actual impact that's been made. So most of these cases, the impact is more on the software aspects. Economy, yes. But you see, the thing is that just because they have electricity, suddenly a community doesn't become entrepreneurial. Because they used to a certain cash flow pattern from their migrant labor related work, etc. They don't necessarily want to give it all up in the first year. For instance. They've also seen many years of promises being made on lots of issues. Things have not worked out. So they want to test it out for 2 or 3 years. Will this thing damn thing? So today, if I give up my job in the city, which I do, say for 8 months of the year, and come back and grow, let's say, whatever, or some horticulture or something in those villages, because now I have good electricity access, which I can use for irrigation and also for some processing. So it takes 2 or 3 years for them to just be convinced that this thing is going to work properly, as in the reliability. So by the time that impact happens, you have to be really patient for all of that. Capacity utilization takes time to build, as in the energy itself. But yeah, the answer is yes. It is being done in a very formal manner in many of our locations. And Deloitte actually has a social impact consulting practice. And I initially used to be very dismissive about but they are actually very good. They actually go to the villages when the usual being dismissive about consulting. So no, but I must admit that they actually do a very thorough job of actually, and they pointed at some interventions where we could kind of change some model, some parts of our model in some situations, etc. So they are extremely good. So they have a practice which actually caters to this segment, and those people are actually, people who can rough it out in villages and actually capture the changes. So I said the snake bite, for instance, is very interesting, right? It's just street lights. They don't have street lights. Otherwise, they don't have any lights. So what street lights? So, but moment you have street lights, then the number of hours that they can socialize also increases, right? Yeah.
Amazing.
और सैमी विलेज पॉलिटिक्स में सॉरी वो हैमलेट का पॉलिटिक्स एक फैक्शन को चाहिए एक फैक्शन को नहीं चाहिए उसमें they pull you?
But limited, because see, what you must understand about tribal communities is typically within a village it's always homogeneous. There's no different caste dynamics. First, I'm just trying to set out why some things don't work in more mainstream villages. The mainstream villages, this also adds a level of problem, right? So they tell you, "Arey, wo caste ka aadmi ke ghar pe kyun diya pehle?" It has happened to us in the more mainstream villages. But one is they're very homogeneous, right? So, and there's a lot. Again, it goes back to the initial. So there are communities where when we go and if we get a sense that this is a difficult village for us to work, we actually don't work. If you sense that there could be some political issue or something, as in political in the village politics. But otherwise, with 40 households, most of whom are homogeneous, and there's something which is making a very major impact in their lives, they don't. So what happens sometimes is there are one or two people who always want to kind of be rebellious, right? So if the committee says that no, we won't give you electricity if you don't be part of it. So say 38 households, one guy. So this has also happened. Two guys say no, this is all rubbish, it won't happen. So the 36 guys do it, and after 6-8 months, mostly the two guys come in because they actually see it work. There's no reason for them not to. So it's not been a major problem in most parts of the country for us.
Even in the money collection, जो वो collect करते हैं for your future investment.
So there have been instances of pilferage and all of that. No denying that. But the point we make in that, so Melghat, for instance, also. So the Melghat area, for those who are not familiar, it's in Amravati district of Maharashtra, northeast on border of Maharashtra. For some reason in 1993, it caught the attention of some high court or something, so malnutrition as a problem exists in many tribal parts of the country even now. There was some malnutrition related deaths which got reported. That's the only point difference in 1993. So Melghat became more malnutrition problem. The same problem exists even in Jawahar. Now what happened in Melghat is suddenly everybody, every NGO landed there. Like it got over NGO, as we say. So now there the villagers, when you go to a Melghat village, they feel that you are coming there to, kind of essentially it's to service some need of yours. It's not for me, right? You want to feel good about having done good for the world or whatever. So you come here and you are making it. So now the attitude, I'm not saying they say that explicitly, sometimes even explicitly. So Melghat mein this, connection will be much lower because they say, humne pucha hi nahi, you came and did it because you want to kind of. And Melghat, we were reluctant. What happened in Melghat? So here it's okay to, I think. So Bank of America, as you know, Merrill Lynch, right? Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. So Merrill Lynch, as you would know historically, was DSP in India, right? Hemendra Kothari was DSP, DS Prabhudas. DSP became DSP Merrill Lynch, and Merrill Lynch became Bank of America. So when he sold, he was on the board of the BOFA Merrill Lynch organization in India. And he is a big wildlife enthusiast. He's done good work in that. So when he realized that Bank of America is doing these projects and we were doing it in Jharkhand and some parts of Maharashtra, then kuch Melghat mein hona hi chahiye. So we were not very keen. But then Kakuna Khati was the CEO of Bank of America here. She could not say no to Hemendra Bhai. So we did 4 projects in Melghat. But of all our 95 villages that we've done this microgrids, we've done several hundreds of villages in which we've done other interventions. The 4 Melghat villages are on the bottom of the list because there was no social cohesion and stuff like that, right? Because it was forced by some top-down decision for whatever reason. So these things happen, but if you take care in your initial social interaction and stuff like that, it can be limited. It cannot be eliminated, but it can be limited. And like I said, once they see the impact and they benefit from it, they tend to be enthusiastic about it.
So Samir, is it that because of this cohesion in the tribal villages, you guys prefer to work there?
No. So what I said is, if I go back to what Arvind also asked me earlier. The basic point is, you don't want to be competing with a grid at all, to the extent possible. Because in most cases in India, grid electricity is extremely subsidized. It can be free at times. It can be of poor quality at times, and it can sometimes sporadically be good also in some locations and good in other locations. The problem is if you have a capex intensive project which essentially pays for itself only in 15-20 years, and you're trying to kind of compete head on with the grid, you're likely to get into trouble, right? So what does Gram Urja do? We choose villages which do not have electricity access at all currently, and where because of its remoteness, electricity access is difficult to provide through the centralized grid. So we choose those kind of villages where the grid is the nearest grid line is about 5 kilometers away, say for instance. That's a good rule of thumb. Once you choose those kind of hamlets are largely located in the tribal pockets of the country. So that is the way we have kind of moved to the tribal areas, not the other way around. We didn't say let's go to, but once we went to the tribal villages, the added advantage of those locations is that within each village it's very homogeneous, right? There are no caste dynamic related issues which otherwise happen in other villages. So that's the flow, not so much that we chose tribal because of those, but it's a bonus in a sense. So even imagine a 5 kilometer, Sam Arora is talking about quote Kotler. So imagine a grid line, and some villages, they have forcefully extended the grid 5 kilometers away. But what happens is, let's say you have a heavy spell of rain, you just need one pole on route to crash, right? The 5 kilometer segment. Then that village loses power, and then nobody has the interest, because your KPI was electrifying the village, not necessarily keeping it electrified forever, right? So you electrify the village, then pehle monsoon mein 2 pole gir gaya somewhere on the 5 kilometers, it's gone. No electricity for the next 8 months. Because 40 households somewhere, which electricity officer has the incentive to go and do anything? They're not part of the commercial, they don't play any role in the commercials of the DISCOM, right? So that's the other thing. Many of the electrified villages also, they prefer to continue with we have had villages which after our project have got electrified subsequently, but they also prefer to continue with ours in many cases, at least as a backup, because they know that the grid can go down. No? That's why we always used to advocate that in these kind. We actually met the electricity minister in 2016 or so and said that let's not use the grid extension to all of these locations. It's not the best thing to do. Very remote places, anyway, you're spending money in the form of a grant or a subsidy or capex, whatever you want to call it, right? But that money, in our opinion, in these kind of villages, better spent by distributed solar rather than extending the grid. And I don't always subscribe to the view that solar is the best option in every situation, right? Most access places, it's not necessarily the best option currently. So the other thing is that, from IFC has one Lighting Asia program, some other Rockefeller Foundation and something. Last 14 years I've attended, and they are all India Habitat Center, New Delhi will be where all of these nice seminars will be held. They all call, 14 years later, if you were to just kind of cut paste the PowerPoint and just change the dates, it's the same story. How do we make it more sustainable? How do we make it more? So fundamental issue is that firstly, a lot of things get confused. Sustainability, as in from the green sense, gets confused with access. The carbon problem has not been created by these villages. To kind of force them, even if it's not necessarily the best thing, to force them to go green. I sit in Bombay in an AC house, and I obviously consume more than 1 kilowatt hour per day. So what happens is this whole electricity access and the green sustainability movement somewhere merged, along the way, kind of. Because in many situations, yes, solar was the best alternative, no doubt about it. But when you have all of this getting confused, you get into trouble sometimes. Like in some situations, it doesn't work well. So you deny people access merely because you want to make it only solar and not. So those kind of things have happened over the last 14 years. All IFC programs, Rockefeller Foundation, Center for Science and Environment, and lots of foundations across the world. There's Shakti Foundation, which is climate action based out of California, some group which funded Shakti Foundation and so on. So a lot of these think tanks. So
Shakti Foundation is also dead, is it?
No. I'm just saying that.
No, because I had some.
No. We've written papers for them. I'm just saying that. So energy access is a certain set of issues.
So Samir, I have two questions for you. One is that it looks like that there are a lot of work, a lot of people have done for various reasons. Sometimes they are CSR, sometimes inspired, sometimes they could not scale or whatever. And you mentioned that thousands and thousands of infrastructure which sort of abandoned because of reasons like something not working, entrepreneur network not there. So my two questions is, one is there a way, I mean, I'm just asking theoretically, that there can be some sort of asset recovery to make them work? Is there a possibility? You know, I know that a lot of complexity and all that, but is it some of this asset can be recovered? That is one. And second is that, you know, now that, you know, see you and Anshuman, obviously, you know, you have that right background, which many of your peers may not have. So are you guys also going and sharing this very actively for other people to replicate what you're doing? I mean, what sort of initiative you're doing, including reaching out to government and all that, if at all you have done, is there some response from their side?
So the second part, to answer first, there is of course a desire to see if it can be kind of communicated. You know, I mean, just the story of Gram Urja over 14 years, just to kind of, not that there's any specific advice or a set of 4 points which can help you kind of, you know, then kind of do the next Gram Urja, or it's, but you know, that is a desire which one has had, but I've not done it in a formal sense. Last year when we had these meetings with Professor Krishna, right, of IIM Bangalore, during the award and even after that, both times I said that this is something which I'd like to do at IMB also, to some extent, whatever extent possible, to kind of just go to the group which is passing out and kind of explain, maybe, you know, something like this, right? But you know, at that time he had said, yeah, let's do it, etc. But I don't think this happened. You may recollect.
Yeah, I recollect.
Both during we had two sessions. One was the alumni, the DA award, and then the next one was when a bunch of 96 pass outs, you know, both times I'd mentioned that, but I think it gets lost somewhere in the system, you know, somewhere. And we get busy with our, we had a very busy year this year, you know, there's a lot of growth. So somewhere. On the first part, I think in principle, of course, it can be recovered in many places. Because some places you just have solar panels lying there for no rhyme or reason. So for instance, I used to be, so there's one, so suddenly people, there's this MP lad fund, right? So some part of it, people want to do solar. So there was this Carter Road in Bombay. At one end of it, they created, you know, this is Bandra by the sea, right? So they created the shed and all of that for some small time garden there, and they put solar panels there. And they put batteries there. So this was 2014, 15, long back. So wondering, why the hell do you want to put, you know, in Bandra, battery connected, you can do a grid connected solar, which is fine. But why would you want to put who's going to monitor this battery based? It made no sense because quality of electricity is excellent here. Why would you put money in a battery based system? So fun thing is, so you need to clean the panels, right? Because of the dust. Otherwise, the output goes down quite dramatically if you don't clean it regularly. So after 1 year, I noticed that to prevent the dust from covering, they put that blue tarpaulin, the ghastly blue tarpaulin, on top of the solar plant. So you put up a solar plant, they've invested some probably 15 lakhs, and then put a tarpaulin to cover the solar plant. क्यों कर रहे हैं? All some of our traffic signals have solar. क्या? First order.
धूप और बारिश से बचा रहा है उसको.
क्या? So of course these can be retrieved, यार.
बारिश से नहीं, धूप से बचा रहा है.
अब क्या बोलेंगे अभी? MP रेड में है, किसी ने बोल दिया हाँ सोलर होना चाहिए, ग्रीन. अरे क्या ग्रीन, घंटा ग्रीन अभी? इससे क्या हो रहा है? फिर एक कार्टर रोड पे डालने से. I mean, that absurd kind of so the problem is in policy also. When we met Piyush Goyal in 2015, we said don't go into these kind of villages. So see, the problem is when you want to do 6 lakh villages and सब कुछ electrification and all, हमारा story बहुत छोटा हो जाता है ना. So he was not very And then they rolled out this program in Jharkhand, the thing I mentioned. Government programs won't work in these places. They'll just collapse. So nobody is interested. Kisko padi hai? Koi to aake dekhe gaya. So in Nandurbar, again, because I'm recounting some. So ICICI got a call from Ministry of Health, state government, saying that please solarize our primary health centers in Nandurbar. Nandurbar is where the Swadesh movie was shot. It's a very tribal district on the border of Gujarat. Very, very sparsely populated, very difficult area. Nandurbar mein karo. So Mr. Jai Singh Dhumal said, solar mein kuch bhi karna hai to main sirf Gram Urja se karunga. I won't give you money, but I'll get Gram Urja to go and visit these sites. Okay. So our team is very motivated, like people pointed out, and also in that sense, a high degree of passion and honesty also. You know? So they won't just do things just because. So they used to go to these PHCs to do these surveys. Doctors there would say, "अरे तुम काय को लगा रहे हैं? मैं तुमको साइन दे दूंगा, अभी साइन दे दूंगा कि लग गया. तुम जाओ ना, काय को तुम्हारा टाइम पास कर रहे हो. तुम पैनल उधर छोड़ दो, मैं जो करना है मैं कर लूंगा. You take the sign and go. No, which government officer is going to go to this PHC? So to reach Nandurbar, I have to take an overnight train from the other Punjab Express, get down at Chalisgaon, then shift into another train which goes to Dhule, and then take a 4-hour jeep ride. कौन सा गवर्नमेंट ऑफिसर को विलेज में जाके देखना, तुमको क्या पागल. सो दे यूज्ड टू कॉल, तुम पागल लोग हो, तुम एक्चुअली कर रहे हो. तुम क्यों कर रहे हो? कोई तो करता नहीं है. There were primary health centers which had been given 3 solar systems. तो हम लोग जाके रिपोर्ट करते रहे, उधर ऑलरेडी 2 है, हमको क्यों बोल रहे एक और डालने को. We could have also said that हमको क्या फर्क पड़ता है ना, you pay us 1 crore in billing for us, we'll do, हमको क्या फर्क पड़ता है. There were actually PHCs which had 3 or 4 rounds of solar systems already given. So can these be retrieved? Of course they can be retrieved, but how do you create a structure where it's financially viable for us to do all of this, right? ये बहुत चलता है सब. This was not part of our core Gram Urja normal thing, but you know.
So all the hubs, you have created a bunch of local entrepreneurs, is it, to keep it running?
Not entrepreneurs, but yeah, people who kind of work with us on a contract basis, if like, you know, because they have the skills, we know of their competence, but they're paid by as a consulting fee as and when they have projects in their location.
I mean, just a quick question, Sammy. So if satellite internet can be a worldwide niche with, you know, Elon Musk or Starlink or whatever. So is this something that you can take outside India? Have you looked at that, or is this?
Oh yeah, we have done projects in Lesotho. So we got a project. This was from it was a UK CDC, or you know, basically a UK development program, along with University of Lesotho and a Lesotho-based entrepreneur. So we got awarded the project in March 2020. Okay, so it was the first time to get out. So we are now completing that one project. We've got recently awarded another project in Uganda. So we're doing projects in Africa now, because many of them want to see this model work there. Now people know of us in this community. People know of us, even globally. Well, it's a small community, of course, of energy access, but yeah, they know us.
Fantastic.
Good, yeah.
Are you, Sammy, are you connected to the Rocky Mountain Institute guys and the ITT guys?
Yes, RMI and us, we've interacted on trying to do. So one, like I said, the problem has been the last 26 months has been obviously a big issue. But with RMI, we were, I forget which country, but one of the African countries again. We were trying to do some work together with them. So so Rockefeller, we know the team, you know, RMI. From time to time we've interacted, but nothing solid has happened on the ground in partnership with RMI, for instance. But one is familiar with RMI. As in there are people. So like I said, the net zero thing has also prompted, you know, people who are now issuing certificates for distributed renewable, like carbon credits. For distributed renewable, can they issue certificates which can be then traded, right? Like carbon credits were traded. So there is an organization called Direct, which was founded again, basically. So they are also in touch with us to kind of roll out programs.
Okay.
So there is some promise of further scale now. Right. So Gramurja raised money till 2012. After that, we've been, we've not raised any equity or debt. So it's operating cash flow positive in the sense we pay all our team members, barring Anshuman and I. There's really no team member which is not being paid reasonably well in terms of market, etc. And we've not had to raise any. So there's no cash burn, right? Over the last 9 years now, I think, about 8 or 9 years.
Okay.
So in that sense, it's a success. I mean, because we don't have any people, we kind of tried to stay away from that. It is difficult, to start talking about exits and all that, can you give us exits in 6 years? And, which is like crazy, right? In my earlier investment banking after we've done deals which have not yet exited. I can tell them that, there are these deals which I have done and which have not exited. You're telling us to go and sell energy to extremely poor people in rural India and give you an exit.
I think this is the minute you started talking about that, the remaining VC on the call also exited. So,
Karthik, but send me a message saying, no, I'll chat with you later.
absolutely. I mean, and at some stage, I want to do a separate session with you because we are linking up with a bunch of solar folks in West Africa and in India. So I really want to get you in as an inspirational speaker for all these people. I think it'll be awesome. Yeah.
So the one thing that I would like to kind of put it on the table is, let's do a group IMB, whatever possible, like it could be 5 people. Let's do a visit to, if it's Bombay also, we can go. It's really just a one-day investment. I think Salil, for instance, because of circumstances, he was able to come to our village, right? Salil Punalekar. He wanted his son to see one of the villages and he spent half a day. And his whole attitude, I mean, his whole perspective on what we were doing completely changed after he actually saw it flying. Right? So happy to host any of you guys, especially as a group. At some point in time, we can kind of plan to go to these villages. People have expressed the desire often, but it's never ever materialized.
Well, I think in addition to that, and this is just my personal point of view, I think that, I mean, the batch, I think there'll be people in there who'll be keen to help in this kind of, right? So what help do you need from us? Like there are captains of industry on this, in our batch, and, there are general captains like Dada. But how can we actually do something to help you? What do you need from, the 200 people of our batch to help you?
So if people are, so even now, despite our successes, it's the binding constraint has always been access to funds, right? So for instance, we have been struggling to say, so like I said, the biggest problem is everybody wants to do, Are Bombay ke paas kuch ho raha hai kya projects? Udhar karte hain. But our projects are in Rajasthan. And even for a group like Tata, which is, like I said, has been in Jharkhand effectively from more than 100 years now, 108, 115 years. 1907 was Tata. Even for the, they were also saying, Jharkhand nahi Maharashtra mein karte. I struggled for 2 years. So for instance, as we speak, I have a bunch of 30 villages in Rajasthan, where the only constraint is capital. So if you're talking of 30 villages, it's like 10 crores, $1.5 million. So if that can be somehow structured in whatever fashion, I know it can be through CSR discussion. So that would of course help us scale big time, and it can be a much larger game than that we can talk of. If you know of a pipeline which is, large pipeline, we could do it across different types of projects, right? It can be biogas, it can be, and many of those projects later don't require continuous capital inflows. It can be rolling kind of funds, right? If you, especially in things like biogas, like I mentioned, because the economics works out so well, and it's not as capex intensive. If I do the first 40, I mean, I'm now demonstrating scale in a sense, right? If I do 40 biogas pipe gas projects in remote villages somewhere.
Yeah.
And then they start paying for themselves. That 40 can become 4,000 in 5 years. It genuinely can be.
Yeah.
But in the initial part, there has to be some kind of more than risk capital. People who are willing to kind of say write it off if things go bad for whatever reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those kind of thoughts, that would always be the most important part of the story. If there's still opportunity, there's still enough places where you can, with money and with a committed team, make a difference, I think. And
yeah.
So, for instance, the people, I think, Prabha Narasimhan Jr. became she's heading up Colgate Palmolive.
Right.
She's become CEO of Colgate Palmolive. So, Vigyan said that he's written to her because Vigyan spent time with me in Bombay and he heard. So, and he's also doing something broadly in the sustainability kind of space, right? In JP Morgan, I think somewhere. I don't recollect exactly, but something of that.
He's also the guy who controls the purse strings at JP Morgan for all this climate stuff, man. So
correct, exactly. So he wrote a mail to Prabha, and Colgate Palmolive will have a obligation to do 2% of their PAT as CSR, right? So if you can kind of so if you have like 10 times the number of, we have Bank of America, Tata, ICICI, Bajaj, we have about 8 or 10 people who've repeated for. But there is a lot of, so for the COVID years, for instance, a lot of money went into COVID, right? Healthcare infrastructure, so on and so on.
No.
For big time, but I'm saying people get attention diverted to other areas. There's a lot of requirement in India. It's not. So if we can kind of think about how that can happen, that would of course enable us to scale further. There's no paucity of good projects.
So I think what we can do is see, these discussions are good, but your work is little different than most of the other discussions which you'll have, right? And not just the batch, people across the batch may get inspired and support, and whichever, I mean, there can be connects, there can be money, there can be time, there can be endorsement, advocacy. I mean, people can support multiple ways. So now I don't know whether you probably know, but there had been an attempt from IIM Calcutta, Kolkata chapter, wherein they have brought in a bunch of people across batches, sort of batch ambassadors. There is a forum, of course, the institute itself is a forum. So if we can create, I'm not saying you can create some sort of a, something which people can visualize and probably track a progress. Maybe, take a hamlet and, develop the infra and sort of see some outcome or impact parameters. I don't know whether it's possible, like, because you give, say, electricity, right? So over a period of time, hopefully their health will improve, their academics will improve, income will improve, like we did for our school project, right? For over a period of 10 years, you can see. So if something can be done, I think we can float it and then have a conversation with a bunch of people with some, intent to help and see who can do what. It can be a good IIM Bangalore sort of initiative, why just a 1996 batch?
Absolutely.
So let's try to do that, because every individual you are helping is a transformation, right? I mean, huge transformation. I mean, somebody who has no electricity to electricity, right? We can't even imagine what it is, right? So, and maybe, some of the other contacts which you talked about, Viru talked about. But let's try to make it a little broader, call a bunch of people who are interested and have a sort of conversation which is a little more focused. I mean, where people can bring in what they can do, really do. And I think every individual can do a lot if they have the intent. It doesn't really matter so much how much resource you have. It helps. But if the intent is right, the ability for most of the people like us to do something is huge.
Right.
That had been my experience, because I may not have capital, but I will know some people with whom I have credibility who will have capital. So, or somebody may have capital, but they will probably know somebody who has expertise, or somebody who has expertise know somebody in the media, whatever it takes, right? Okay, so I think that can be a good way, because yours is a very special case. I think not many in our batch are doing, to my knowledge, probably nobody is doing something which is so direct.
Right. Mohit Charnier is also kind
Yeah, yeah, Mohit is one here, but he is out of, he's off grid.
I spoke to him on the day we all met. No?
He has to be connected to the grid first.
Yeah,
but yeah, he's also doing, yes,
okay.
probably different, little different. Yeah, we can hear him
Yeah,
out, or whether it can be combined, some sort of, you take a village or you take a locality, then you can have intervention of energy, utility, then somebody can bring in finance, somebody can bring in, financial inclusion. It can be many, right? It can be integrated development, which is a very big thing, but it can be a good start, and people can visualize, okay, this is a village, will be involved. I mean, we have, say, all of us have some 20, 30 years. I mean, probably most of us are well beyond. I was calculating by our average Indian age, I am at 80th percentile of life expectancy. If you really take, we survive for whatever 67 years. So I'm sure most people have a calling for legacy, right? What we leave behind, and we can channelize that energy. So let's try to do that. I think that will be good.
Great stuff, Chabi. Great to hear from you.
Yeah, but fantastic. Yeah, I recorded all. I tried to put some points for the group, and others can also join and build to that.
This is a lot of fun, actually. Dada kept posting. I started getting nervous. क्या बोल रहा है हर दिन समीर कुछ बोले मैं. I don't normally, really like formal presentations. It's just I like to speak freely.
No, unless you write couple of times, you will forget.
Yeah.
Because it's a rolling thing and too much noise in every WhatsApp group. It's rolling. So you miss it and you don't go back and see what has been messaged. So
right.
I mean, still so many people have not seen, I'm sure.
Right.
Oh, thank you, Sammy, for sharing it here. Quite.
But it is the leadership. Thanks for your effort, my boy. Keep it up.
दादा क्या बोल रहा है? दादा के ड्रिंक का टाइम हो गया.
दादा का अभी बेट का टाइम हो गया यार. At this age.
Dada, wanted to say your hairstyle is badass now.
Amazing. Huh?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Esau and I were discussing it before the rest of you joined.
Yeah. Hair raising experience.
I wish I had one of those,
Yeah. Okay. Okay, we'll not get there. Hair and all. Complex. Chalo. I think it's good.
Yeah.
Good to see Parvez also after a while. Sanjeevan.
ठीक है दादा. Point noted.
Body didn't come on video. Rohit also didn't come, but I'm sure.
Rohit did come.
Chalo. Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Stay safe.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Chalo. See you.
Yeah, bye.